is another one of these exciting ones, but in many ways may be one of the most complicated and require the most study of a number of the ones that are on here. And that is to increase the recreational connections to the riverfront. Now, we have been focusing on the CBD proper with regard to Burlington, Quincy, the business districts. But I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't recognize the greater draw that we have as a village that can bring people in and then feed that business community. So that's where this one comes from. And the first idea is to establish an Indian Gardens natural area. And this natural area, as part of this natural area, we would extend the walking path that is currently in Indian Gardens and actually extend it up to the dam, or where the dam used to be. We would emphasize our Native American background, which is something I think that we don't do enough of in our village, and also the historical importance of the portage, and not only the portage, but the general geographical significance of this area. I mean, for example, a lot of folks probably don't know that Riverside Road is our very own A1A. Riverside Road is a beach road. Riverside Road was the beach of Old Lake Chicago some 14,000 years ago. And that's why part of our town has a sand substrate. That's why part of our town has a clay substrate. So these are the kind of things that could feed into this. Also, to emphasize the ecological importance of the Hoffman and Fairbank Dam Restoration Project. I've seen a lot of people out there at that bridge looking at that project, and it's an enormous success. The ecological impact of that project already has been very successful. So it seems to me that there's an educational, and tourism is probably too strong a word, but a draw to bring people here to see how it can be done, how it can be done right. This is where the idea of establishing the canoe and kayak livery comes in. I suggest here the possibility of using the scout cabin. Ms. Beck had a good point that if we want to try to feed the downtown, maybe the Swan Pond area would be a better place for that. Again, I don't even know if this is feasible or economically possible, but this would be what the lead implementer had to look at. And if we were able to develop that area, the possibility of using the scout cabin as a nature center for to kind of be the focal point of this broader natural area. So that's number A. B would be to evaluate the riverbank behind the police station and the former youth center for a walking path. I think one of the goals many of us have for the future would be to have an actual walking path along the length of our river through our town. And there is a possibility to explore that behind those existing buildings now. There's actually kind of a two-tiered reinforcing wall back there. So the idea would be to get back there and see if it's feasible for us to actually turn that into some kind of walking path. And then the third one is to open up the river views and to support shoreline habitat restoration. This, again, is something where we need the experts. This is where we would have to have people from FLOSS, from the LAC, to come in and to guide us. So with regard to this overarching idea of increasing recreational connections to the riverfront, we have down here that the Parks and Recreation Board would be the lead implementer with input from the LAC, the Historical Commission, and FLOSS. We have Melinda Pruitt-Jones is here tonight, the Executive Director of Chicago Wilderness. I suspect that something of this magnitude would extend beyond our village and would require also regional outreach and regional connections as well for the expertise necessary to do something like that. Please.
I just have a couple of questions.
Please.
One, Peter, may not fit in here. You may know the answer. But it's related to Swan Pond. Now that Swan Pond is virtually fixed, right, unless there's an ice blockage, are we going to be reseeding it, or is that the sort of thing that belongs on this list?
Well, as part of the project, there is still a 2-year maintenance with the Army Corps. One of the things that the village is looking into is whether or not the turf area applies under that agreement, or if the 2-year maintenance was primarily for the culvert, the check valve, and any of the invasive species removed along the riverbank. In the last few weeks, the turf has kind of started to take. So right now, the Army Corps is kind of evaluating whether or not it will come. And if not, then that is something that probably the board will have to decide on whether or not we want to reseed it, or what type of uses are we planning to put down there, and what type of turf would we need in order to sustain those activities.
Thanks. Then another, it's just a comment based really on the path in Swan Pond. And I'm sure that people will look at it, Susan. It's also about the multi-use of these areas. So when we create a path, a narrow path, we have bikers and we have walkers. And I just think it'd be an interesting discussion. Peter and I have talked about this, that's why he's smiling. It'd be an interesting discussion to talk about the changing use of our parks. And particularly as we look at what's happening with a paved section of Swan Pond, it's changed. So just as kind of something to...
With the new pavement in place, it is being used more so than the stone-based path, and parts of it were just man-made path. So it is being utilized. There are a lot more runners, bikers, just people walking and looking at the river. So the goal of bringing people to that area has worked.
Right.
And so for me, one of the things that I think is part of the review, and it's been talked about at the EDC, is the width of the path.
Right. That's what I was actually referring to as we think about these connectors and the material of the path.
Right.
Right.
Then I just have one more, a general question under the infrastructure, not under this particular section, but when we talk about infrastructure initiatives, for Riverside, and if we think about the new parking lot, we've talked a lot about green structures and making green infrastructure a part of who we are, as a part of our mission. And it was alluded to, well, it's actually mentioned in the CMAP plan in terms of zoning, actually, or what we require as we develop, if we were to develop parts of the CBD. But I wonder if there's a section on, I wonder if that's enough. It's a question for the board, or for the LAC, or perhaps to get residents such as Ms. Pruitt-Jones's input on whether it's a strong, we don't have anything specifically in here about that, and whether we actually need to say something based on the recommendations of the CMAP document, or whether it's really worth putting a number there. So it would be in this case, it would be number 5, which says, I don't know, could say anything such as make sure everything we do, we consider the green ramifications, or evaluate. It could be stronger than that, which is be proactive in changing our codes, in talking to residents, and talking, in this case it's a CBD, but everything we should be asking that question. And I'd just like to see that brought out more. Melinda, I don't know, I know you've thought about this also.
And to Jean's point, I'd like, if we're talking about this trail, I don't know whose idea it was to have blacktop in such a narrow path through the Swan Pond area, but I'd like to see the trails be similar in material, and tell the same story and be the same width. And this trail system has been kicked around and talked about for years and years, and looking out in the audience, I can see former trustee Buttermer. It goes way back when there was an iced tea grant, which is now this trail that has come through and gone all the way out to the western suburbs. We have the ability to put this trail in from, if you can think, from the swim club all the way around to the dam. And it can be done in an invasive way through the woods, identifying trees that probably are invasive species that need to be removed. And the trail does not have to be straight. It can wind. It should wind. It should be interesting. It should have elevation change. And it can be hidden from the street. And I know there's a lot of people in town that disagree with that, but I challenge them to walk that area and see that, and that can be done. But whatever we do, and to Jean's point about keeping it green, I'd like to keep it all looking the same and not have different materials and different paths. going behind the library, the village hall, and the rec center, and tying into the swinging bridge, we're going to need the permission of the township that is their bridge, and we'll need to have their cooperation in this adventure as well. So I just wanted to add that.
I just have a follow-up suggestion. I know we're not supposed to be working the issues here. I recognize that. Perhaps, Mr. Bailey, you're hiding from me, maybe for good reason, and Public Works hasn't been mentioned yet. Maybe this is something that Ed might want to think about, because I know he thinks a lot. I am bragging about you. That you do think a lot about green infrastructure and how to move the village forward with this.
Right.
Maybe we could just add,
I think that's
number 5, Ed Bailey.
So that sustainable, basically, and
anytime, Ed, you can pick any time for that.
And it seems to me, and of course, in my imagination, the whole idea of sustainability, especially sustainable infrastructure, since that's
right,
so much
that's
of what we have some control over, that should be part of our branding effort.
But maybe we could just say that.
I think we should. As number 5, we would just say something to the effect of sustainability should be a major factor in all considerations.
Right, and then make sure Ed's name is there.
And make sure Ed's name's there. I just, again, not to dive too deep into the minutiae here, but just to kind of, because Chairperson Leander's here from Parks and Rec, and they're going to be kind of overseeing this. I have had some preliminary discussions with Director Bailey and with our village forester, and we have to be careful when we start talking about creating hiking paths or walking paths, because if you start getting them too formalized, now you have maintenance issues, you have liability issues. So this will, to your point, Trustee Foley, this is going to be something that has to be carefully thought through in terms of what nature of path are we really talking about here?
And there's all different kinds of paths.
Right. So this will be part of the.
But we have to know that this path will be used, and it will be a multi-use path. Unless we want more signs saying no bikes, or running only, or So.
It'd be nice to have a Riverside path through Riverside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Please, Mr. Ritter.
Would it be okay to make some comments?
Of course, please do. Yeah, please do.
You're in hiding back there, that's the thing.
Hearing what's been said in terms of involving RB, paths, wayfinding from our streets to our way around town, all of those things, I think what Mike Foley was saying, they also apply to paths as minimal intrusively as they can possibly be. I have 3 minutes of comments. Is that okay?
Sure.
Almost 2 decades ago, several of us came to the village, and we described a partnership made up of volunteers, the village, the rec department, and the women's Riverside Junior Women's Charity. The group grew, and we built an ice rink for the community. Friendships and memories also grew, and the Big Chill crew and the partners will soon build the 18th annual ice rink. Last year, R&B's athletic director asked to create a fundraiser for R&B sports. Again, a few volunteers came to the village, to the rec department, and discussed a partnership. We planned the Bulldog River Run with several major components. The removal of the dams and the improvements in Swan Pond brought focus to the river, but it was too soon to use. The Village of Riverside, Cook County Forest Preserve District, and the township were partners, and they were great. The Forest Preserve District cleared a natural path on the far bank. The township helped celebrate with the historic suspension bridge. The village registered the runners, pruned, mowed, safeguarded, and more. I can't thank the village enough for the way they extended themselves for RB's fundraising run. Now, I've personally been known to be very critical of RB's referendum techniques and some of their facilities, but I'm here to say I believe they're headed in a good direction. However, I'm disappointed it's not, with all the new athletic facilities, being the center of the community as was promised, especially since Riverside is long on kids and short on facilities. On a positive note, last Monday, Both staffs of the village and the high school met to brainstorm mutual benefits of working more closely. Then on Tuesday at the Board of Education meeting, Dr. Skinkus reported that they are close to a solution to the 4-year natatorium problems. For your information, they've embraced the community's involvement over the swim air quality issues, and they're about to resolve those issues. I'm here tonight to say thanks to the village for the help in 2012 and to support RB's giving back in 2013. Here's my point. One goal last year and for this year's run is that it be off-road. We believe that's more fun and it's healthier. It's more natural. It also avoids the cost and inconvenience of street and driveway closings. In addition to the enjoyment of the renewed natural path and beautiful suspension bridge, there's also a simple connection that could be made to Swan Pond. I call that the missing link, and it's been referred to this evening. It runs adjacent to the river, right behind these buildings. It's out of sight, it's overgrown. Frankly, it's been neglected since most of us were kids. But it has good sight lines. It offers phenomenal views of the bridge, the river, the forest, Swan Pond, and the architectural details of these wonderful landmark buildings. Like so many volunteers who trim overgrown sections of the riverbank, we volunteer to clean up this tiny strip of land. Consider it part of RB's thank you to Riverside, and hopefully the furtherance of a good relationship. I promise you that if you grant that permission, we will make this tiny strip of land usable, attractive, and safe. In other words, we'll provide the missing link so more people can experience your vision as you develop it with meetings like this evening. I'm here to seek your approval. It's a short part of piece of land. I'm not proposing that it be developed as this type of trail or that type of trail. I'm proposing that it be clean, that it give you a clean canvas to work on your vision for what that ought to have a long-range use for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Does anybody have any comments about?
I'd like to speak to that because I agree with what Mr. Buttermer said about the sightlines. I think that's going to give us a better idea of what we want to do looking down here with the former rec center and what that is all about. And if this path is being used and getting used frequently, and we decide to do something with the rec center as far as selling it, removing it, redeveloping it, the path has to remain and work in conjunction with the new development of the rec center if that's, jumping to phase 2. So,
I mean, I think it's certainly something that should be considered. I don't think
Can I
it's...
ask one question?
Please.
Just a question. Can I
Please.
identify the area?
Please.
I'm just asking if you can identify the area that he's mentioning. Swan Pond's a big space.
Where he's talking about is directly behind the police station and the former youth center.
And the library.
And the library. It's that strip right down through there.
Perfect.
I mean, that's not the purpose of tonight. The purpose of tonight is to not drive down to be giving approval of particular projects. This is something that the Parks and Rec Board is charged with looking at in conjunction with staff and developing the idea and then bringing it back to us. But I don't think it's something I'd rather not get distracted with a particular issue as we're trying to move through. Any other comments about that?